All right, similar to the last lesson, just adding on a little bit, where we won't always have a fraction with a denominator of 100. But the fraction needs to have a denominator of 10, 100, or 1,000, or anything that has like 10,000, 100,000, a multiple of that, I guess. Well, not a multiple. A one with some zeros, to say it simply. So we have to change the fraction to have one of those denominators in order to change it into a decimal or a percent. So think of the decimal. Once we do that, then you can think of the decimal in hundredths, like we've done before, or tenths, or thousandths. And then for the percent, either write it over 100, or we can divide by 100 to get the decimal. If we want to write it as a fraction, we write it over 100. If we want to write it as a decimal, we either divide by 100 or just think of it in terms of hundredths. All right? Because remember, decimal is either in tenths, hundredths, thousandths, whatnot. Percent is essentially, well, is out of 100, so it's like hundredths, just telling me like how many hundredths I have. We'll do some examples. Say I start with 6%. Well, 6% is going to be 6 hundredths, so I can even skip over to do my fraction out of 100 next. I don't have to go in any particular order because I can go from percent to decimal or percent to fraction, fraction to percent, fraction to decimal. I can go any order that makes the most sense to you. And then for my decimal, again, I want 6 hundredths. Not 6 tenths, I want 6 hundredths. And now for our fraction in simplest form, we have to take our fraction out of 100. In this case, we can divide by 2 to get 3/50. I will point out that if I take a calculator and if I take 6 and I divide it by 100, that does give me my decimal if I take my percent and divide it by 100. One other thing I can do is take my fraction, like 3/50, and do 3 divided by 50, and that will also give me my decimal. Especially when you can't make it out of 100, that's a very simple way to do it. Let's start with my decimal now. Decimal is 37 hundredths. That's always going to match my percent, assuming it's hundredths. It'll match my fraction out of 100. And then actually that's simplified, so I can just write 37 hundredths for that as well. Now say I start with a fraction like 4/5. I'll show you 2 different ways to do it. I'm fine if you use a calculator, but you do have to know how to use it correctly. So say I was going to do it by hand. I would need to get a fraction out of 100. That is very important to turning it into decimals or percents. So I can think, all right, what can I multiply by? Well, I can multiply by 20 to get to 100. 4 times 20 is 80. So I can write 80 hundredths and 80%. Now, if I wanted to just start with my fraction on my calculator, I can just do the numerator divided by the denominator. 4/5, 0.8 is the same as 0.80. So notice I got my decimal by doing division with my fraction. You have to remember that I'm doing the numerator divided by the denominator, and that does give me my decimal. If you want to do it by hand, that is fine as well. So again, not out of 100. I need it to be out of 100. So then I can multiply by 4. Multiply by 4. 12 times 4 is 48. 0.48, 48 hundredths, 48%. Again, if I wanted to use my calculator, I could do 12 divided by 25, which gives me my decimal, which I can then say, well, 48 hundredths are going to match my percent. I can also put that over 100 as my fraction. So there's some different ways, which is nice because there's some flexibility, but there's not just one set of rules for me to tell you, which does make it a little more tricky. So try to think what it actually means, try to picture it in your head, and if you need help doing those things, as always, I am more than happy to help. Just let me know. All right, good luck.